As summer comes to an end, a new season is upon us. But it has nothing to do with the solstices and angles of the earth. This is all about the money and your vote. Election season is here.
Pat, I love this governor's race for so many reasons.
Oregon's governor's race is finding itself in the national spotlight with millions of dollars pouring in.
Just watch for this to be the most expensive race in history.
3 strong candidates are on the ballot, with new predictions calling the race a toss-up.
This is really the impact moment for these campaigns.
Here's the story.
I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We're just days away from the official end of summer. The morning air now has a bit of a crisp feeling to it, and football is finally back. All of that means it's time for political campaigns to shift into overdrive, and none is as fascinating as Oregon's race for governor. Historic in the 3 women running, and likely historic in the sheer amount of money raised and spent. That all makes it our big story. This is the time of year when things start to happen in political campaigns, and a big one came in last Friday when the nonpartisan Cook Political Report called the Oregon governor's race a toss-up. Earlier this year, the group ranked the race as leans Democrat. Then at the end of July, switched that to competitive. And now they're saying, you know what? It's a toss-up. Anybody could win. I got the chance to talk with Jessica Taylor from the Cook Report earlier today. I asked why things changed. She said it came from both public and internal polling, and then also conversations with insiders.
It's really sort of changed the trajectory of where Republicans across the board felt that were their best pickup opportunities. We started this cycle with Republicans being very optimistic about races in Pennsylvania and Michigan. However, they got weaker candidates in those races. And even though those states on paper are far more competitive, again, I think it's combined with the fact that Republicans do have a strong candidate in Christine Drazan, who is raising money. And then you have the 3-way race. And it really is, there's a frustration among Democrats that of Betsy Johnson's presence in there, because they feel like she takes both votes away from both of them, but could potentially take more votes away from Tina Kotek.
And we've certainly seen the money start to flow in from the national campaign committees, which is another sign that they feel the governor's seat is up for grabs. The Oregon Capitol Insider reports that the Republican Governors Association, a national group, gave Christine Drazan $1 million last Monday, and that the Democratic Governors Association, also a national group, gave Tina Kotek $1.2 million this past Thursday. As things heat up, it seemed like a perfect time to check in with some of our favorite Oregon political pundits. Let's start with Jim Moore, a politics professor at Pacific University.
Well, the national money is pouring in, which is great. We've been expecting it to happen, but within the last week to 10 days, we've seen millions of dollars of national money coming in from governors' associations and things like that. And so that means that all sides think that they can win. And Betsy Johnson, who doesn't have a national governors association, is just raising money hand over fist to keep up.
Jim Moore there has seen more than a few elections come and go and considers this race for Oregon governor unique, in part because of the third candidate, Betsy Johnson, who's unaffiliated. Most years, the third candidate gets maybe a small percentage of the vote, but this time, Johnson is a serious contender.
Usually what happens when there's an unaffiliated or independent candidate is they maybe get 5 to 10% of the vote so they can be a spoiler. The polling, and the latest polling we have is now about 4 or 5 weeks ago, shows that Betsy Johnson is a true contender, 20 to 25% of the vote. So you just do the math on that. It looks like, the 2 main candidates, the Republican and the Democrat, are kind of at 30%. Betsy Johnson's right behind him at 25%, 20%. So it's anybody's race.
Rebecca Tweed is another political insider who is generous in sharing what she knows. She's running several Republican campaigns right now, although not the governor's race, and she took a few moments to talk about what it's like on the inside.
We're right in the time in a campaign cycle where this is going to get pretty bumpy. People will report polling numbers that are all over the place. Ads will be all over the place. Candidates will start disappearing so that they can just focus on the do no harm part of a campaign. It's really exciting.
And about those ads, yes, I do see your emails, and no, I'm sorry, I cannot make them stop. In terms of campaigns, Tweed says they're all entering a time of very high intensity right now.
When campaigns enter this part, it's like heavy strategic phase, heavy communications phase. You really want to focus on making sure that every part of the campaign is super disciplined. And so I call it a do no harm, which is don't put yourself in a situation where you might make that statement that makes a headline, right? Don't, travel around the state in different places when you might need to be in a different place. Every single day, this campaign is going to change. Every single day, there's a new ad, there's a new donation, there's a new message. We're not even to October yet, when we all know the October surprise will come. I think we'll have a few of those.
By the way, I asked, and she would not give up what she thought those October surprises would be. It's interesting to take a look at the numbers for registered voters in Oregon and see what party they represent or don't. The largest group does not represent any party. They're the non-affiliated voters with 1,017,662 members. Democrats have roughly 1,011,000 members and Republicans 729,535. Here again, Professor Jim Moore.
If we look at all the registered voters, it's kind of 35% Democrats, 35% plus a little bit of unaffiliated, and 25% Republicans. So between the Democrats and the Republicans, there's like a 300,000 vote difference there in terms of registration. So the Republicans need a lot of help to get through there. So the unaffiliated voters, will they see Betsy Johnson as their flag bearer? I don't think so, simply because they're unaffiliated for a reason. They don't want to be a part of a party, but that's the only thing that unites them. That's the only thing that unites them. But the thing is, with the unaffiliated voters, they vote at a much lower rate than Republicans or Democrats. In the presidential election in 2020, 90% plus of Democrats and Republicans voted. Only 65% of unaffiliated voters voted.
Which is still not a small number by any stretch of the imagination. 65% of all those non-affiliated voters, according to my calculator, is 661,000 people. And remember, you don't need to win more than 50% to become governor. You really just need to win one more vote than the other two candidates. So the winner this year could realistically maybe get 34%, for example, and win it all. That's one more reason the campaigns are now going all out, says campaign consultant Rebecca Tweed.
I do think it'll be a pretty close campaign, right? And a majority of Oregonians, have shown that they really vote the last 4 or 5 days of an election. Now that we have the, vote by postmark at 8 p.m. on Tuesday, there could be a lot of votes that come in late that change the game. We really could see a lot of information that comes out in October, and one candidate just blows it away and takes the lead. It's hard to tell. But I do think just with the caliber of candidates and the type of campaigns they're running, the amount of money they've already spent and what they'll raise, that this is only the start of real direct voter outreach and communication. To people like me, that's really exciting. To everybody else, it's probably going to feel a little overwhelming in a couple of weeks.
Now, some of you have told us you are already feeling overwhelmed, but in any case, we'd love to know your thoughts on the governor's race. Is your mind made up? Are you on the fence? Who are you leaning for? Send us an email to thestory@kgw.com or leave us a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Now to an issue that gets a lot of you fired up, police staffing. We've seen your comments about first responders taking a long time to show up or not showing up at all sometimes. It's no secret that agencies in and around Portland are struggling with low staffing. And we saw the real-life impacts of that just a few weeks ago during a night of rampant street racing here, takeovers in the city. At the time, Jade wrote in to ask us, I'm wondering what's going on with all the street racing in Northeast Portland and what exactly the police are doing about it. The only police car I saw last night was speeding away from the street racers. Help us understand why PPB can't seem to get a handle on this sort of thing. Well, it's a good question. We pressed PPB back then for answers because Jade wasn't the only person asking that question. And the answer from Portland Police was two-pronged. One, it was a violent night and they were dealing with several shooting calls. And number two, staffing. They sent this statement. Although it is the goal of Portland Police Bureau to answer calls for service as soon as possible after they are dispatched, street racing incidents are typically large crowd control events requiring a large number of officers. Officers are currently working through several life safety calls, and there are not enough available to safely address the calls regarding street racing. Officers will respond as they become available, and it is safe for them to do so. Again, that was a few weeks ago when they sent that to us. That's just happening here in Portland, but it's not isolated to the Portland area. There are shortages in several departments around the state, and police are having to get creative when it comes to hiring new officers. And even if they can attract candidates, there's yet another problem. It's taking months for new officers to get into the police academy, and state law requires they finish it before they hit the streets. The delay is certainly causing issues. Devin Haskins looks into the problem to try and find out what's being done to fix it.
My biggest thing I've always wanted to do is some type of public service. And
Jacob Teeney was hired by Tigard Police last October. He had to wait just under 2 months to get into the academy.
So that 6 to 8 weeks that I had before was a little bit out of the norm. I was kind of the first person to do that.
At the time, 6 to 8 weeks was considered a long time. Today, that turnaround time from hire to academy is now more than 6 months. March 2023's class is the soonest one with an opening. Here's Tigard Police Commander Jamie McDonald.
We didn't used to have that problem. We could hire somebody, they'd be here, do an orientation and some pre-academy work, some initial training for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and then we would send them off to the academy. But now we have several months to fill.
While he waited, Officer Teeney was among the first in the Tigard Police Department to go through what the department called Phase 0.
So essentially you're doing ride-alongs in uniform with another officer, and you're just basically observing the whole time.
State law says the department must send a new hire to the academy, quote, not later than the 90th day after the date of officer's employment by the law enforcement unit. Although there are exceptions to that rule if there are delays.
So get used to changing it up a little bit.
In the state of Oregon,
use it how you want to use it.
All city, state, and county law enforcement hires go to one singular academy, a 16-week course at the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training campus in Salem.
So there's the one wall that we can't really see behind.
So we are limited by the amount of students that we can put into any particular class.
Brian Nelson is the acting director of the state's training academy. Each class is limited to 40 students. Here they learn everything about police work, from how to conduct a traffic stop,
take 2 steps to your right,
to taking part in drills that mimic real-life scenarios.
And 1 step back.
State funding, though, is keeping more officers from getting through. 16 classes are scheduled every 2 years. A normal year would have a class held in month 1 and 2, then a break in month 3. This would repeat until all 16 classes were held. But to meet the demand, the agency can move around classes to fill in the gaps. They've already moved 3 classes forward to fill some holes.
April would be the first time that we kind of tried to address the need.
One issue there, if you rob Peter to pay Paul, you're left with a larger gap at the end of the 2-year period, known in government speak as a biennium.
Then it becomes a little bit more of a disadvantage because
the current one ends on June 30th, 2023. The proposed solution? Asking the state for help.
So what we're doing is we're going forward to the legislature to ask for a limitation increase to fund additional classes at the end of the biennium. So basically taking our base 16 up to 18.
So with new hires having to wait 6 months to get in, that also means they have to wait more than a year before they're fully trained and out on the streets alone.
Which, for our patrol division, is really huge.
The issue of not enough classes has been a conversation that they've been having for the last couple of years. The last 2 bienniums, for instance, they've had to add extra classes to each one. And to that point, the 16 classes that there are now is actually double what they offered in 2008 when there was only 8 classes. I'm Devin Haskins, KGW News.
Thanks, Devin. For the thousands of you who take I-5 over the Columbia River, you'll be happy to hear that 2 ships in the water are finally being removed. It's been more than a decade since the vessels parked along the riverbank, and recently you could only pretty much see the top of the boats. They both sank. But now the U.S. Coast Guard and other state agencies are stepping in to clean it all up. Joe Ranieri brings us the latest.
Removing any sunken ship is no small task, but the Coast Guard is working on pulling 2 out of the Columbia River.
The vessels first arrived in the Portland area in 2006 because there was a nonprofit organization that was interested in turning them into museums.
Those plans never worked out, and eventually these 2 vessels, the 100-foot Saccharissa that is now floating, and this 125-foot long ship, Alert, that's just above water eventually were seized by the state of Oregon. But this isn't the first time crews with the Coast Guard have been out here.
Back in 2020, the Coast Guard responded to a report of diesel fuel in the bilge of the motor vessel Saccharissa, and we responded utilizing the Oil Spill Liability Trust Fund and removed thousands of gallons of diesel fuel.
The Coast Guard will be using $1 million from that fund to raise each ship out of the water and then safely dump any remaining oil out. Petty Officer First Class Travis McGee says the Alert sank last October, and it was this past spring when the Saccharissa sank. He doesn't know what caused these two ships to go down, but at one point there were people living on them.
The Coast Guard will oversee operations to raise both vessels and transport them to a facility to offload any remaining oily waste from the vessels.
Top priority for the Coast Guard this time around for these two ships that sit between the Interstate 5 bridge and the Railroad Bridge.
We've been committed to the protection of the environment and the safety of the waterway,
making sure no oil is spilled in the river or this sandy area of Hayden Island in North Portland. Joe Ranieri, KGW News.
And Joe tells us work is well underway. The Saccharissa has been lifted and is floating again. And the plan is to get the other one, the Alert, out of the water by the end of the month.
Still ahead on the story. More than 15,000 people in the United States die from a meth overdose every year. But now, promising news on a potential treatment for meth addiction.
Oh, it sounds too good to be true.
The study is happening now in Washington, how it works and how a COVID treatment plays a part when the story returns.
Here's an issue we hear about from you each and every week: methamphetamine addiction. We've heard your stories of seeing people abuse the drug in public, or a troublesome home in your neighborhood, maybe where you suspect meth use, maybe even a loved one who struggles with it. Meth addiction is a real problem, and overdose deaths from meth are on the rise, especially in the state of Washington. But there may be a glimmer of hope on the horizon. It comes from researchers at Providence Medical Center in Everett. Eric Wilkinson reports.
I've been in and out of this hospital for years and years.
Curtis Letskis has been through the Providence ER more times than he can count for overdoses and other addiction-related issues.
One of my more lengthy stays was 67 days in ICU.
Among other things, Curtis was addicted to meth, his disease causing him to live in a tent for 9 years. Getting clean was brutal.
The withdrawal is, it's really uncomfortable. A lot of sweating, and a lot of anxiety.
Curtis was far from alone. The number of fatal meth overdoses in Washington ballooned from 54 in 2000 to 728 in 2020. Nationwide, meth deaths have grown exponentially to more than 15,000 per year, a 180% increase. While there are medical treatments for opioid addiction, there's nothing for meth. Until now.
Oh, it sounds too good to be true.
Dr. Tom Roby is part of a research study at Providence Everett treating meth addicts with monoclonal antibodies, the same technique used to treat COVID.
It's like a switch.
Antibodies cling to the meth, sucking it from the brain. Then it's flushed from the body. What's really promising, a single IV treatment can last more than a month, preventing the person from getting high, keeping them clean while they get their lives straight. Roby says of the 10 patients he's treated, all of them have seen their lives change for the better.
They have their housing voucher. They've made medical appointments. They've got their ID. They're coming in with a family member or a partner who cares for them. They've got a smile on their face.
These days, Curtis Letskis is still in the ER all the time, but as a drug counselor, this new treatment providing incredible new hope.
I really do hope that this works out as expected. It's amazing.
There is one caveat to all this promising treatment. It still has a lot of hoops to go through, and if approved, it likely won't be on the market for another 4 to 6 years. We also want to take a moment to congratulate Curtis, the man featured in the segment, who is now 5 years sober. Great example of someone turning their life around and using their experiences to try to help others. Still ahead on the story, thefts and vandalism are a major concern around the city of Portland, and one hotel is using a futuristic approach to help curb crime. Yes, a robot. We'll show you how it works after the break. A Northeast Portland hotel is turning to technology to help deal with theft and vandalism on its property, and it's taking the idea of security cameras to the next level. Robbie the robot has been on the job for less than a year, but has already made a difference in cutting down crime at the hotel. You can see he's no RoboCop, but he is effective. Christelle Kumwe shows us how he works.
It's like a roaming security camera.
The Aloft Hotel at Cascade Station is rolling out a new kind of security guard.
He runs in random patterns, so he never repeats the same pattern.
They got this robot to deal with vandalism from homeless encampments in the area.
Kicking over sprinkler heads, doing damage to some vehicles on occasion.
General Manager Mike Daly says they tried hiring human security but ran into staffing issues.
We had to try to find a different solution that could work 24 hours a day that was affordable.
That solution is Robbie, a 5'3", 350-pound robot. They deployed Robbie back in December to roam the parking lot. They say it's made a difference.
We haven't had incidents here in months, and I think it's just due to his presence.
Robbie is equipped with 360-degree vision and thermal imaging.
So if he sees that there's a heat source behind a vehicle, he'll go investigate that heat source. He scans license plates as he rolls around the lot constantly.
Anytime it detects someone, the robot immediately alerts the front desk. That person can see what the robot sees. They can talk to people in the parking lot through Robbie and determine if they need to do more, like call 911.
This call may be recorded for your safety.
He's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If I hired humans to do that job, and if we could even find people to do the job, it would be about 5 to 7 times more money than it costs for the robot.
Hotel guests like JT Thomas welcome the idea of a security robot.
Yes, I think that'll be a plus, having something like that around. It definitely make me feel secure, make me feel safe knowing that my car is being watched at all times.
I think they feel a sense of security that there is literally somebody patrolling the outside of the building at all times, 24 hours a day, and right around their vehicles. And so, as we speak.
Daly thinks security robots like Robbie would do well patrolling other places.
Why not have a robot do it? I mean, really, if especially they're not going to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, act the wrong way, they're just going to alert that there's an incident. And so it's kind of a different way of protecting people.
Christelle Kumwe, KGW News.
Looks like a great idea, unless I guess you're in the private security business. By the way, Mike Daly, the general manager you just heard from, says other companies have come out to take a look at Robbie. So you may see more of these patrol robots roaming around other businesses in the not too distant future. Keep sending your questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com. When we come back, how you can help foster kids in the Salem area. This week for our Hey Help campaign, we're highlighting Salem's Angels. They help empower children and families in the foster care system by providing community support with several programs like Love Box. Volunteers create personalized care packages each month to meet the needs of children and parents in the foster care system and to help provide support and create community. This can include snacks, activities, or books for kids, or gift cards or household supplies for the parents. If you would like to donate to Salem Angels or learn how to volunteer to create love boxes, just open up the camera function on your phone right now, hover over the QR code that you see on your screen, and it will take you to them directly. We hope you take part in that. That's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. And remember, the story, our story, well, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow.
This is KGW News at 6:30.
And good evening. We begin at